So when I put the Seders record on, I remember just being like, what is this? It starts off with this great drum break, and then when the guitarist comes in, the one guitar has got a little bit of a, he's doing a little bit of a tremolo thing while the other guy is just kind of bashing away. And it was so strange that I didn't quite know what to make of it. All that I really knew was, okay, this is a 60s record, this is a band, you know, Greg's gonna shit.
Oh, it was total envy. When he played it for me, it was total envy because it was so up my alley. It was such exactly the kind of record that I'm always looking for. So he was totally right. I mean, he nailed it. And he knew what my tastes were. So I think he knew right away. And I think I may have even offered to buy it from him. I can't remember.
I went to the internet to see if anybody knew anything about it, and pretty much discovered that it was like an unknown record. So I guess it was about in 2012 that somebody contacted me because they knew I had a copy of the Satyrs 45, and there was a history of Asheville's garage bands that was going to be run in the Mountain Express, and they were going to lead with the story of the Satyrs.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. Bruce was the only one who was not from West Asheville. Rick, Jeff, and myself all grew up in West Asheville, all went to the same junior high, then came to Lee Edwards, it's now Asheville High, but Lee Edwards High School, and that's where we began to meet other musicians. So all of the music that we played and the kind of music we listened to was pretty much the music from that period, probably 61, 62, when we were just in junior high.
I started out in music listening to Dixieland jazz. One day on television, I got to see a guy named Gene Krupa, and he did a drum solo that was probably fodder for Buddy Rich to use later in years. When I saw him, that did it for me.
I started when I was about 15, and Jeffrey here taught me how to play guitar. I'd go every Saturday to his house and give lessons. Sometimes we'd sit out on the roof of his front porch and play. And I loved guitar, and one of my heroes was Wes Montgomery, a jazz player. And I was listening to that kind of stuff, and always a frustrated jazz guitar player. But I got started, and then later I played with just different guys around, and then Jeff contacted me about, playing with the Seders, playing guitar, and I was thrilled to do that.
I got my first guitar when I was about 9, and it came about because I met this wonderful lady. She was German, and she spoke broken English, and she was a very pleasant lady, and she had a guitar, and I was fascinated.
You never told me this.
You don't know everything. And she drew chords on a piece of paper and put where you're supposed to put your fingers. That sound familiar?
Yeah,
And
really.
that's how I got started playing the guitar. She would draw chords. She would draw the fretboard and put numbers where you're supposed to put your fingers, and that's how I learned my first chords. Bucky and I played music together, and we were in a folk music compendium, or whatever you want to call it.
Consortium.
That's even a better word.
Yeah.
And we sort of evolved from that into what became the Seders.
9th birthday. My dad came home with a little cheap guitar, probably couldn't have cost more than $20. He wasn't going to spend a lot to see if I could play, so
or if I would learn to play. So anyway, I was sitting on the front porch, and he brought the guitar up, and he said, see what you can do with this, which is what I said to my oldest son when I bought him his first guitar. I was listening to people like Little Richard, Buddy Holly. I wasn't a big Elvis fan, I have to say, but when the Satyrs formed, we actually played a lot more R&B than we did other kinds of music.
You know, I was thinking the other day, we maybe started playing Beatles music so we could get a job.
Probably. In the early 60s, we were still probably in junior high, so it's more like about 1964 when we actually began to play. But during the lead up to that, Asheville had a lot of country music. It always had country music. There were live radio station programs. My dad played on one of those right after the war. So there was a music scene that was more that kind of music. And then once rock and roll hit, then everybody who could play 3 chords wanted to be in a band. Jeff had a pair of cufflinks, and I still have one of them, that had a satyr on it. And you had to have French cuffs, though. You couldn't wear them on regular shirts. So French cuffs, and we would take turns wearing the satyr's cufflinks.
That's how you ended up with one.
And I wound up with all of them. So that was kind of where the name came from, that Jeff suggested, well, why don't we call ourselves the Satyrs? I mean, a big cufflink, you know. And that was where the Satyrs name came from. And that was late summer of '64. We were still doing the folk music thing. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that really tipped the situation for us was when the Beatles came on the Ed Sullivan Show. Everybody who could play a guitar saw that, and then we were trying to play Beatles tunes. And so we started playing that, but we played a lot of Rufus Thomas and that sort of stuff, Wilson Pickett. There were several radio stations in the area, but they tended to specialize. They would play country music, or they would play rock and roll. Wise Radio, I think was
WISE.
That's right, WISE. I think they were more the rock and roll station, and everybody listened to that for the most part. There was also a restaurant out on Tunnel Road that had remember the Wise Music Tower?
Yeah.
There was a DJ who sat up in this tower, and he would drop a bucket down, and you put your song request in there, take it back up, and then he would play your song, and everybody was sitting out there in their cars listening to him on the radio.
He invented the original bucket list.
Yeah, so, but that was kind of the way kids would spend their weekends, listening to music. We were playing a lot on weekends too, but most of the record sales came through like the stores like Woolworths and Newberry's, the department stores. Yeah, they had a record department, and Dunham's Music House also sold records.
So did Sears.
Sears sold records, yeah. But you could find pretty much what you wanted at some of those outlets like that. And they would spin the records for you. I can't remember that girl's name, but she was the record salesperson forever. And she would play whatever anybody wanted to hear. And there'd be kids out there dancing, you know. And we would all gather up there after school too. And I don't recall the Wal-Mor 45 ever being played anywhere.
No, me either.
No.
Yeah.
And I think it was given out to friends and a few things like that. And I think they may have had some for sale in the Hi-Fi Sales store.
I think one of my favorite things that we ever did was the junior class had to create something to raise money for the senior prom at Lee Edwards High School. And wasn't it Shindig that was on TV at that time, was a popular show. So they decided they were going to have a shindig and have all this talent, bands and everything play. And boy, we were all over that. We wanted to get in that. And our time comes up, everybody's playing and getting a good response and everything. And our time comes up, we're behind the curtains, and the head of the student body or something announces, he says, now we're going to bring out, and he says, the only local band to play at the Pines was a big deal place where all the kids went, but they had name groups you know, drifters and spontanes.
We never played there.
Tams.
I don't know where you got that information.
Well, he announces that.
I started
The place
the rumor.
the place goes crazy. Everybody is screaming. They open the curtain, we start playing, and man, everybody's screaming and
I
hollering.
remember the song we did.
I thought we were the Beatles. You know, we're playing, and so we played. Everybody got 2 songs. We played a couple of songs, and the place was wild. And we're close the curtains, and we're packing our stuff up, get off real quick. So the next band, and they open the curtain. You got to play another one. You got to have an encore. And so we go, oh yeah, okay. So they open the curtains up. We decided to do "What I Say" by Ray Charles.
We started out with "Walking the Dog" by Rufus Thomas.
Yeah, Weezy's singing it, and right in the middle of it, he rips his shirt, falls to his knees with singing, you know, in the mic. And the girls rush the stage. They're screaming and hollering. Like my mother said, she saw 2 girls carried out that had fainted, and we just, you know, I could believe the response. I think that night just sold me, this is what I want to do, you know.
I can tell you exactly how "Don't Be Surprised" came about. One afternoon, late summer, 1964, I'm noodling around the piano because I don't really play the piano. But there had been some folk tunes that we had played that had these kind of interesting chord progressions, one of which was E minor to G to D. And I was just noodling around on that, and I had been playing this strange little melody that kind of fell together. And I was dating a young lady at the time, and I was dating another young lady at the time.
Easy.
And 2 of the songs that came out of those 2 relationships, I began to write the song "Don't Be Surprised" for the one I was leaning more toward. And then I wrote another song that's part of the Mark V things that was "Don't Waste Your Time." That was for the other girl.
Yes.
"Don't Be Surprised" came together pretty quickly, but we never performed it. We never worked it up. We never did anything with it until Will Hammond came along. He heard the band and asked if we had any original material. And I had written that, and we had recorded it for the Wal-Mor folks.
Yeah.
So a friend of ours at school came to me and said, "You guys have a band. My brother-in-law has a recording situation at the store he works at. They want to try some of their equipment out. Would you guys be willing to do that?" So sure. So she put us in touch with him, and they set it up for this evening. We arrived with all our stuff, and it's not even a 4-track. It's just a little single track, not even a true 2-track, a single track reel-to-reel recording thing. And he put some mics out there, and so we recorded over a period of about 5 hours or so the 2 tunes, "Don't Be Surprised," live. Really, that's what it was. It was more of a demo than anything. And then Jeff had written "Blue Blue World," and that was the other side of it.
It's just teenagers acting like teenagers, and it being a perfect representation of that.
So somewhere in the spontaneity of, "Hey, we're gonna record," then is when we actually began to work the thing up. Rick worked up the guitar parts. I sang the lead. They all sang harmony on it, and that's kind of how that part came together.
I would also like to give a little love for Blue Blue World, because I think that Blue Blue World is a remarkable song as well.
Everything around on me has that tint of blue that comes when your woman tells you that you're through. I sit alone and cry each night. I know this feeling just ain't right. Now I live in a blue world.
And in the face of the rocker, the sort of moody ballad can kind of get overlooked. But what I really love about Blue World is that the guitars are so jazzy and single line and cleaned on it that it sounds to me like something off of the third Velvet Underground record, when Lou Reed is sort of writing those moody, introspective kind of ballads.
How did Blue World come around?
I was playing with my guitar one day, and I went do 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 do. It'd be cool if I wrote some words, so I wrote some words. There it was.
And there it was.
I've always written, and I think you have too, or at least in your head.
Yeah.
Oh, and I would also point out that Blue World is the A-side of the single, whether they decided that that was going to be the case or not, or whether Wal-Mor, the Wal-Mor conglomerate, decided that that was the radio hit.
Something always kind of comes around. The curious thing about it was when we did the Mark V studio recordings, we didn't do Blue World. No, none of those. We did do Don't Be Surprised and the other song that I had written, which, as that worked out, the song that I wrote for the other girl, we had all these tunes that Jeff was singing lead on. I had a tune that I was singing lead on. Bruce sang some songs, but he wasn't one of the more prominent lead singers. I think you had like 2 or 3 songs that you sang with the Satyrs, something like that.
It's harmony.
Yeah, and a lot of harmony.
We didn't have beautiful songs.
We didn't have a tune though of original material that Rick sang. So I took the song that I had written, and the two of us sang that as a duet, and then the little solo part that's in there is Rick, and then we're all singing harmony on that. But that's kind of the way we worked that out, so that each of us would have at least a song that we could be featured on.
The morning we're driving down to Mark V, I believe it Won't Be Long.
Yeah.
You and I wrote It Won't Be Long going down.
They were riding together in one car, and Jeff and I were riding another. So driving down Highway 25, the old road to Greenville, we wrote that tune.
Got out and played it with guitar to these guys, and they had it. And it was, I think it's one of the better songs on the whole thing.
It won't be long till I'm coming home, and it won't be long till I call you on the phone. Baby, I'm gonna tell you that I love you when I get home. Yes, when I get home.
Put it together there. Just, we had played probably at that point in time a year and a half, and we played a lot. If we weren't actually playing jobs, we were rehearsing. So we were very comfortable with how we would put things together, and everybody sort of knew what they were going to do and what they were expected to do, that sort of thing. So I remember one of the rival groups, they weren't really a rival group, but one of the other groups heard Don't Be Surprised and asked me if they could do it, and I said, what the heck, sure. Because by that time, we had recorded it, nothing happened at all, and we basically, within 3 or 4 months, forgot about it. And that is the truth of this story, that after about 3 months of it doing nothing, we were moving on with our music and other things too, but doing our covers. And it's only when Will Hammond came in to the scene, we were playing the club later on in the summer of '65, And it was then that he asked the question, do you have any original material?
It was just kind of a basement type club, I remember. It was downstairs and like a cellar type thing or something. But anyway, I went down there and saw the group's name outside and everything, and I went in and listened to them for a couple of sets, you know, and I really liked their sound. And I don't remember if it was after the gig or on a break or what, but I struck up a conversation with them, with one of them, and then met the rest of them. And I liked them so much. I was very much into recording and had done a lot of recording in Greenville, South Carolina at Mark V Studios. And so I asked them if they wanted to come down and record, and they said, oh yeah, sure.
He was the one who brought the cello and the Hammond B3 organ in on one tune, and then they had some other musicians come in and do some of the stuff. I think on Get Out of That Rut, I believe some other people played.
It's like we need an organ on this. He picks up the phone. 10 minutes later, there's a guy, an organist there or something. Whatever you needed.
Will actually, he was the producer, arranger, and other than our music, we did all of that, but he was the one who really suggested, let's do this, let's do that. Let's try the Johnny Cash tune that we did, Walk the Line, and that arrangement.
Turned out really well. I thought it was completely different from Johnny Cash.
And the tune that we later found out was a poem that was written back in the Second World War, To Be With You. We thought he had written that thing.
I thought for a long time, I thought that they wrote that.
And then it came out that he didn't. He took that and arranged it and taught it to us there on the spot.
We discovered that it was from a letter from some soldier in World War II or World War I or something that he wrote to his wife or girlfriend, and it had been recorded and made into a song several different times.
I do believe that God above created you for me to love. He picked you out from all the rest because he knew that I love you best.
Joe Huffman is the fellow who wrote the other one, Don't Get Out of That Rut.
Get out of that rut, yeah.
They're worried about the lover that just put them down. You got to get out of that rut and stop moving around. You got to get out of that rut. You got to stop the live.
As far as my contribution, I wanted them to do the song Get Out of That Rut because I really liked that song, and Joe Huffman, one of the owners of the studio, and another guy named Reggie Christopher, they wrote the song.
And they taught those to us there when we got there that day, and we recorded them. So I think they came out pretty good for having heard it 30 minutes before, you know.
Yeah, but
Yeah, the thing about the Wal-Mor, what was the name of the place?
High Fidelity
Fidelity
Sales.
Sales.
Sales. Okay, the night we did that, it was like we did it right here in this room.
It was recorded sort of almost on a whim one night when it was freezing in a hi-fi shop to a just like tape recorder and a few mics in Asheville, and the only way that it was ever sold was in a little box on the counter in that hi-fi shop.
No, there was no acoustics involved. There was no boom mics, just
That was like the showroom of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like the show where people
It did
came
have
in and looked at
carpet on the
records.
floor.
You know. And when we got down to the other studio, it amazed me that we didn't do the singing and play the instruments at the same time. We did the instrumental portion, came back later, a couple hours later, after we had a break, cooled off, whatever, and sang to our own music. To me, that was unique and earth-shattering that people could do that, you know. But we just did it one night in the cold, like Bucky says, just in this place, like in this cinder block place, and made all this noise that still was pretty damn good music, even though the environment was nothing to brag about by any means.
Not conducive to playing music.
Well, if you can think about just moving,
Spoken like a college graduate.
moving the things out of the way
Almost graduate.
and just making room to set up the band and the recording equipment, one little reel-to-reel and 2 or 3 mics. And nothing, these fellows who did the recording I don't think they had a clue really about how to do this. They just did it. And so what you see is what you get, what you hear is what you get. But the people who have heard the Wal-Mor recording as opposed to the Mark V recording, for some reason, they like the Wal-Mor recording better.
Both things are enjoyable. Both things are present 2 different pictures of the same band. One in a very produced manner and one in a very raw.
I don't think it's anywhere near the quality of the Mark V, but there seems to be some teenage rawness to it, you know, that they like. Nobody knew that we had done the Mark V stuff. So once that became known, then everybody's wanting to hear what was going on with that. So it's a much better engineered situation. Joe Huffman, as Bruce was talking about there, Joe was the engineer for that, and he was the one who wanted all the separation. You know, let's lay down the instrumental tracks, overdubs, come back and do the harmonies and all that business. We had never done that before.
Startup recording studios that are just trying to allow these people, young people usually, to make a document of what it is they feel very passionate about. And to me, that is like, that's different than a real recording studio. It's almost like a field recording.
This was never set forth in front of us as like, we're going to try to do a record deal. It was a demo. And he said, we'll see if anything comes out. Was that your understanding?
Yeah.
Just a demo.
An interesting part of this, you may or may not know, shortly after that, Will was drafted.
That's why we never heard back from him.
Exactly. It became increasingly clear that everybody who could walk was going to go to the military of some sort. So I took the test to go into the Coast Guard and passed it. So I got a draft notice. And I said, well, gee, I already belonged to the Coast Guard. I hated to leave the band. I thought the band had a great future. And I still think if fate hadn't been what it was, we could have done something more than play in Asheville. We would have gone somewhere. I took the recordings of the Seders with me wherever I went. Those recordings that were done at Mark V have been to the South Pole.
Played for the Penguins, did you?
Absolutely. And a lot of guys on the ship really liked the music. And where can we get more of that? And I said, there is no more. I think we all carried it with us. I just had a tape.
He called me and said, you need to get in the Guard. It's a good gig. I was still on the edge waiting to be called. I was in college, but had not been drafted. So I had a knee issue. And so I was rejected for the Coast Guard. And the guy said, if I can't have you, nobody will have you. And sure enough, I was never called by the draft board again.
None of us were actually drafted. I joined, Bruce joined.
Yeah, I was My number never came up, but I was married with child in 1966. So I wouldn't have gone anyway. And I hated it, the band breaking up. But I continued on playing music, quit for a short time, tried to get a real job, and I didn't fit.
So I was married, going to college, and had a wife. She was working, and I was going to work part-time. The draft board came along and gave me a draft notice. Because I wasn't going full-time to college, they drafted me. So I went down to the building, used to be right over here where they had all the recruiters, and I said, I can't go now. I got to have a delay program. They had a 90-day delay and a 120-day delay. Army did, I think Marine Corps did. And I said, I got to try to join something else. And this staff sergeant gets up from behind, and I tell him my predicament. He said, you want to be in the Marine Corps, son? And I said, yeah, sure. And so he grabs me by the hand and said, don't you worry about it, sit down. So he goes up to see the Army recruiter, comes back in about 15 minutes and said, forget about that draft notice, sign this. So he said, you're in the Marine Corps. But he said, there's a problem, you've already signed, you're in the Marine Corps. But he said, the draft would have been for 2 years, you have to go in the Marine Corps for 4. I said, oh, it's no problem. I can do that standing on my head. I think I had 27 years of federal service, and I retired.
Late summer of '64 through to graduation of '66 is really the life of the Satyrs.
Unknown Asheville garage band sounds like the Beatles meets the Velvet Underground.
They just follow their own teenage instincts, and for it to actually be good is not an easy thing to find. And this record is not easy to find. I knew it was something above the ordinary and really amazing. There are people out there, because I know them, who are dying to find a record like this.
Don't be surprised.